I think. Hi, everybody. I am Allison Foss, and I am the Executive Director of the Myasthenia Gravis Association. We are so glad that you're joining us this afternoon. If you're new here, we welcome you. We hope that you'll check out our website, www.mgakc.org, and look at our calendar and connect with us at either in person or virtual opportunities that we have coming up. This evening, I am excited to turn it over to JV Smalley. She is the head of patient advocacy at Immunovant, and she's going to walk us through what we're going to talk about. JV?
Thank you. Can I have the first slide again here? Thank you. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for that warm introduction, Allison. And I'm thrilled to be here today to present today's AIM program, which is all about really amping up your social voice, especially in advance of Myasthenia Gravis Awareness Month. Next slide, please. So I want to give a lot of thanks to the MGA for all the work they've done with us and also for partnering on delivering this AIM program. We're greatly appreciative and greatly value the work that the MGA does in bringing support to patients living with myasthenia gravis. And we also are extremely grateful to everyone within the MGA community who helps to guide our daily work. Next slide. So if you're not familiar with Immunovant, I'll tell you a little bit about Immunovant. We are developing targeted science and tailored solutions. We're a clinical stage immunology company dedicated to enabling normal lives for people living with autoimmune diseases. And what we're doing is developing targeted therapies that are designed to address the complex and variable needs of people with autoimmune diseases. Next slide. Thank you. So a little bit about the AIM program. The AIM program stands for Advocacy in Motion. This is a skill building program designed for US-based patient advocacy organizations. So our discussion today is really going to be focused on helping you learn to use your social media channels to create MG awareness, to build connections across the community and really take action to raise awareness during MG Awareness Month in June. So before I introduce our speaker, I'll also just note that there is a Q&A feature in the Zoom menu below, and it would be best to put all of your questions in the Q&A box, and then we'll use that at the end. We'll make sure that we save some time to go through some questions and answers that are in that box. So with that, I'd like to introduce Mike. Mike is our social media expert. He's a social media and marketing professional. Mike is actually the social media director at Bright Data Healthcare Focused Communications Consultancy, and he's worked all over the healthcare space. He's worked at J&J, he's worked at Sanofi. He's also done work for Pfizer, and he's also done work in the consumer space as well. In addition to the work he's done in healthcare communications and consumer industries, he also has worked as a contributing author for Forbes, Mashable, and for Huffington Post. And he's an adjunct professor at NYU and Fordham Universities. He lives here in New York City with his wife, and she's the chief nursing officer, that's Amy. And he oversees a mentorship program for 500 plus high schoolers. And I'll let him tell you a little bit more about this fun fact, but he is been a reoccurring clown 7 times at the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. So with that, Mike, I'd like to welcome you and go ahead and turn it over to you to get us started.
Thank you, JB. There's nothing, my wife Amy, what she does, these are all great things, but to be a clown in a parade, nothing gives me more credibility for this presentation today. it is National Nurses Day and National Nurses Week, if you didn't know. So May 6th. So it's actually, I got married 3 years ago to Amy, and she's at the hospital from 6 a.m. till 10 p.m. tonight, doing all kinds of events to support all the nurses at her hospital. So if you if you have a nurse that you love this week is a really good time to send them a note, stop by and drop off some cookies or whatever. But I mean, what do we do without these amazing nurses? They're the best. Thank you for joining, everybody. I wish I could see all of your faces, but I'm grateful that you could get on Zoom on a Monday evening and talk about social media. So I'm going to go through a little bit about kind of what we're talking about today, but I want to hear a little bit from you as well. And so there's the chat function that you see here on Zoom. If you have a moment to go through and can you answer these questions of what is your primary social media channel? What do you use? What channel do you use the most? Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, Twitter/X? Is there a platform that you favor more than others? And the second question is, like, how do you primarily use that? Do you kind of just observe most of the content that you see? Do you post about your personal life? Do you spread awareness about important issues? Do you interact with content from other people, or you kind of scroll and observe? Or is there another way that you use the platform? So if you have the chat function, go ahead and enter that in there. And I want to go through a little bit about, oh, that's great. And if you put it in the Q&A, that's great as well. So thank you, Mike, for YouTube used for gathering information, not posting. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. So it's great and go ahead, take your time. I'll just kind of keep talking. So feel free to go and use the chat function or the Q&A function there. I love that we're having this conversation about social media. We're heading into MG Awareness Month in June. And so there's so many ways to get involved on social media. So I hope that some of the tips that we talk about today are helpful for you as you think about the content, how you interact with content, what works, what doesn't work. And so I also want to point out that we have kind of limited time tonight. And so we're not going to go through kind of the technology and kind of tactical ways to use Instagram stories and that kind of thing. I honestly, we could spend so much time on each of the platforms and it'd be great, but in-person one-on-one is a little easier in that kind of format. So tonight we're going to talk about kind of stepping back away from the technology a little bit and just thinking through these platforms that were created as just platforms. And then we as humans are the ones that are filling up that content with our own things. So what's going to make the most sense for the objectives of why you use social media? Let me just look through some of the other options. Yeah, Facebook, Instagram. Maybe you toggle kind of back and forth between the platforms. So thank you for sharing. If you don't mind, I'll read a couple of these. Facebook mostly, that's where the members of our user group are. Instagram secondarily, but don't have enough photos to really drive that. Personally, I'm on X/Twitter more. Facebook and Instagram secondarily, 90% as a viewer, 10% as a kind of a poster. Thank you for sharing. Facebook and Instagram, use it for informational and promotional items for our audience. I've tried to get a discussion going by posting questions, but don't get too much interaction. Thank you for sharing that. We'll talk a little bit about that. And that can be very frustrating as well. So do all this work to have interaction, and then when you don't have much of a response, it can be incredibly deflating. So thank you for sharing all those. Maybe I'll share one more. Sorry, it just came in. But Instagram and TikTok. Share more personal information on Instagram. Go to TikTok for fun. And sometimes repost, share stuff for friends, peers to see and spread, or to spread awareness. Use X a lot too, but more to get the latest updates. Okay, I like that. Thank you guys all for sharing. So that gives me a sense of kind of who I'm talking to and what platforms you use the most. So our focus for today will be on 3 sections. And as we go along, please feel free to put a question in the Q&A in the chat. We'll have time in the end to go through and answer some of your questions, but if you have comments throughout, please feel free to share. So we're going to have 3 primary focuses for today. Number 1, we'll talk about how to tell your story on social media in an impactful way. 2, we'll review tips to consider when creating content. And thirdly, we'll talk about what to do after you've captured someone's attention. How do you keep them engaged and engaging long-term? And then we'll answer some of your questions there at the end. So I'll go through this just really quick. It sounds like most of you are very familiar. You're all on social media. You kind of know what works and what doesn't. But to go through some of the demographic information, so you're thinking about what content's most appropriate for your particular audience. So it's hard to ignore Facebook. It owns the largest overall segment of social media users in the US. So for adults, it still commands 53% of all social media site visits in the US is on Facebook. It's getting older. Obviously, it has been for a very long time. It's been around, but it's hard to ignore Facebook. And perhaps you have community groups and that you're part of, especially for the MG community. It's worth noting that Twitter/X is a complicated one. Obviously, the last year or two, there was a poll last year, almost exactly last year, 2023 of spring, and it said that half the users reported that they would be unlikely they would be using the site a year from now because of all the politics and everything surrounding that. And so we're kind of waiting for all the results from has that come to fruition and that kind of thing. But you can also see kind of the daily engagement for that primary age group, how long they spend on those particular platforms as well. So thinking about yourself, like how you might get this on your iPhone, showing you how much time you just spend on the phone. So it's interesting to think for yourself, like how much time do you spend on each of these platforms per day? And then, of course, when it comes to TikTok, absolutely the fastest growing platform. The daily engagement, 46 minutes, it doubles in users per year. Again, a lot going on in the news about TikTok and where that's going as well. So we're watching that very closely. LinkedIn, if anyone uses LinkedIn, the reason I mention LinkedIn right now is the fact that it's 5-6 years ago, LinkedIn was almost primarily just I'm looking for a job, or I have a job available, and it was very much a professional network. And now it's become kind of a professionally social network. You'll see more and more if you go to LinkedIn, people posting more about their family and more about what's happening in their lives and things like that. It's really shifted in the last 5 years. And so it's nice to see some of that. You get a little background look at a lot of people that you know professionally as well. Okay, so our first section is about telling your story on social media. Telling your story is a very powerful way to spread awareness and drive social engagement. But I understand 100%. I know this because I just had a video for my parents' 50th wedding anniversary, and I asked everyone in the family to send a 60-second video to me that I would edit so they could watch as what is your favorite memory of them as a couple and individual. And it was pulling teeth just to get people to do that. And so, getting in front of a camera and taking a selfie video or picture or whatever else is very difficult and vulnerable. And so I completely understand it can be very difficult. So what can you do? And so I want to start with a little exercise, and you can enter these in the chat as well. So I'd like to take a second. You could write it down with a piece of paper and pen on your phone or just in your mind. Is write down 2 or 3 people, organizations, or brands that you really like to follow on social media. So which ones do you go to pretty frequently and look and think about the content? So take just maybe like 30 seconds and think about that and write those down if you can. Okay. And then if you could, in the Q&A button that you see there, if you feel comfortable, share your 2 or 3 that you like. You could even put the link of that, the Instagram account or whatever it might be. You can put it in there for us, and then we'll talk about it a little bit. There's one, JM. Hopefully I'm not getting, I apologize if I'm getting the last name wrong, but Stevens, Stebbins, who is a writer, speaker living with an autoimmune disease. I like her content because it's relatable. You like the writing. I like that. And that's great. And maybe perhaps share why you follow these people, what's interesting about them. Someone wrote, I enjoy people who are smart and lift up others instead of being self-promotional. Yeah, I think we can all understand that. One for CNET. Yep. So kind of tech news that are taking place. Mike, if you don't mind sharing, what is it about CNET's content that you really enjoy? The National Park Service, funny yet informative and great pictures. Yeah. Kind of escapism a little bit too. Don't you love like National Geographic and that, like just those type of just content where you can kind of just escape and see just beautiful imagery of forests and animals and everything else. And so thank you for sharing that. A number of accounts for local news, my state's governor, Norwood Now, which is your town's Facebook group. And then a second for the national parks. Shout out to the National Park Service. I will go and follow them on whatever accounts they're on as soon as we're done with this. Because how often do you have 2 people give a shout out to the same account, especially one that's a little, yeah, keeping up with the latest technology about the comment about CNET. So thank you for sharing that. Anyone else have any they'd like to share before we move on? Okay. So any of those, the 2 or 3 that you wrote down, the second part of this I'd love you to do is, whiskey people and distilleries. Nice. Can you take your phone and just go to one of the, go to their page really fast on Instagram or Facebook or TikTok, choose your platform and go to one of those 2 or 3 that you follow and just go look and observe their content, kind of scroll through, look at their content and just think about a couple things. Let me put this up. Sorry, I'm navigating a couple things on my screen here. So as you look through the content on, say, their Instagram account, the National Park Service's Instagram account, I'll just use that as an example. Do you feel like when you look at their content, the copy, the imagery, are they speaking to you as their biggest fan? And what do you really enjoy and value from their content when you look through? There's millions of brands and people and individuals like that you could have chosen, and you chose these 2 or 3. Like that's incredibly powerful. Like that's incredibly powerful. You chose those 2 or 3. And so it's nice to know what draws you into them. But also, are they speaking to kind of the general population, or are they speaking to you as someone who knows the lexicon, speaks the same lexicon, I should say, and would do anything for them, share their content and engage with them and that kind of thing. So just take 30 more seconds or so and just look through. Think about those. And if you have any other ones you'd like to add to the Q&A button there, please feel free. You guys are great, by the way. These are awesome examples. I just did this exercise with my daughter's junior high school, and Chipotle was mentioned by far more than any other company for sure. Okay. All right. If anyone has any other thoughts, you can put that in Q&A. Okay, perfect. Thank you. Okay, so from that exercise, you'll see, I think you'll see that people you're connecting with as speaking directly to you is important. As a friend, as a community member, I hope there's an element of just kind of, it's sitting across the dinner table from someone that's a friend. How you speak to them is different than someone that's at the table next to you, right? So maintaining an authentic social presence includes just, these are some of the tips. It's just being yourself, being you and speaking to your audience in your own voice. So whether you're funny, emotional, vulnerable, serious, or all of the above, use language and content that you'd use during that dinner conversation and avoid creating a different persona. You can feel and sense when someone's using a different persona than themselves, or you meet them and there's something that doesn't connect, or a brand or a company is trying to be something that they're not. And we can't fall into that trap as well. The second is storytelling is king. Always think what you'd like to communicate and how it can be filtered through in the form of a story. We'll talk a little more about that too. And then a tip that I talk to all of my clients about constantly, which is collaboration. So being a strong voice for the community is what everyone wants to be, but becoming the kind of capital THE voice of the community is not for social media. It's an area of collaboration. Think of ways consider ways that you can include, you can feature, highlight, or otherwise collaborate with others in your content. Make it genuinely about the awareness, the impact of the community, and not just about you. And so I want to invite, let me just close my little Q&A here so I can see Sarah. I want to look at an example of storytelling, this time from within the MG community. Sarah, it's not awkward at all that we're just all looking at your face and your Instagram post right now, but so you all probably know Sarah. She's amazing. She's our virtual host for today. So give Sarah a follow. You can see her Instagram account right there. She does an amazing job. I just want to point out how amazing Sarah is of being authentically herself on social media. So a few things that stand out to me about Sarah and what she's just really doing right is she gets right to the core of her story. There's not a long intro or outro. It's the meat of her story is just right there. She always uses her own voice. She's vulnerable, which is very hard to do. Image and video based. So we see her, and then tells her unique story. So she's not telling others what to do, what to believe, what to think. She's just sharing her experience. And so I wanted to have Sarah on here to ask Sarah a little bit, if I may, about Sarah, what inspired you to put yourself out there on social media to discuss MG initially?
Thanks for the acknowledgement, and also let's see. I think what had me post about this was when I was first diagnosed. It took 4 years for me to get a diagnosis. And in the meantime, I was having these symptoms and I didn't know what was happening with my body. And so receiving a diagnosis felt like a big relief for me. And I was actually advised by some family members and people close to me not to share about MG or illness or chronic health conditions on social media because it could have an impact on employment or different opportunities moving forward. And I considered that, but I felt that sharing about my experience and being able to connect with other people who were going through something similar was more important. So I decided, you know what? Like shame can only survive in the darkness. And when we talk about stuff and it feels taboo, maybe let's talk about it and put it out there. And as a result, I have connected with so many wonderful people, especially in the MG community. So
Thank you for
yeah.
sharing. there. Like I mean, that's really heavy too, right? To have family that just, I mean, it's a valid concern. You know, I could see a parent being like, just be careful what you put out there online, and but also, you know, getting over that and finding the value and obviously connecting with others. And I guess once you did put yourself out there on social media, what has been the reaction of your, I say your community, meaning it could be those within the MG community, but also those that are outside. Kind of what has been the reaction from people when you put yourself out there?
I remember the first post I made, it was about my diagnosis. And I said something like, oh, I finally, after 4 years of having these symptoms, I finally have a name for what has been happening to me. And I'm not losing my mind. Like, it all makes so much sense now. And I think it was one of my most liked posts. And a lot of people commenting like, oh, I've been going through something similar. Is it okay if I message you to chat about my experience? And so I felt really supported and acknowledged and seen. And I think it kind of opened the door for other folks to share or seek support, like they're going through something and it feels scary to them. And just knowing that we're not alone in this, and then utilizing social media to connect, find support groups or different Facebook groups, for example. I've connected with a lot of people. So yeah, overall, just positive feedback that I've received.
That's really great. So a lot of it was you post kind of broadly to people, and then some of those conversations went into kind of a like DM kind of private messaging to learn more about MG and more about it and everything else. And that's great. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. We'll bring back Sarah. She's around. So think of questions you might have for Sarah. So we might bring her back a little bit later as well. So thank you for sharing that. So next, about creating impactful comment. We talked about how to talk on social media, your authentic voice. That's just one piece of the puzzle. And so I want to go through kind of some of the best practices when you're creating the content itself. So some of the tips for creating great social content is being focused. So think about, there's a lot of great examples that you might see on social. Perhaps it's one of the 2 or 3 brands or companies or individuals that you follow. It's one story, it's one video, it's one focus. It avoids trying to be comprehensive or overloaded information. Just think of goldfish mentality of just, we only can capture someone's attention for so long, and then it's gone. So, so one story, and then trying to striving to be bite-sized. So for instance, if you're doing a video, I always recommend to try and keep it at a maximum of 60 seconds, and not just because it makes the most sense for, say, the platform itself, but honestly, you can whittle it down to 1 minute. If it's when I'm talking to a client about social media content, every platform, it's YouTube can be longer and that kind of thing, but I'll always try and say, if it's above a minute, I really have to prove that it's worth their attention longer than that. And so what does that look like? So striving for bite-sized kind of nuggets. We'll talk about visual later, a little later in the presentation, but visual content is more likely to be shared than any other form of content. And then staying consistent. So you might be overwhelmed on how often do I post, what time of day do I post? I have some thoughts on that if you want to talk about that at the end of the presentation. But staying consistent is a value. And it also gives you a little bit of a structure to say, all right, I'm only going to post X times per week or per month about these particular subjects. And then I want to make sure I'm going to hold myself to that. So instead of I need to be posting constantly, but the rule of thumb is it never post for posting's sake. It needs to be a value. So let's talk about visual content really quick. So short form video that are less than 1 minute, they have a 2.5 times more engagement than long form videos. So another reason why to have it so short. There's a huge drop off. Whenever I'm posting a video for my clients, I'll look at the analytics and it skyrockets. And then as soon as it hits that 60-second mark, it just kind of starts to wean off. And so And also 51% of users are more likely to share a video with friends and family over any other content type. Again, video is absolutely key. So the uncomfortableness that you might be feeling right now, if I don't want to get on video, there we're going to talk a little bit of different ways that you can use video that's not featuring always you, if that's not something that you feel comfortable with. But we'll talk a little bit in a second here. So I wanted to stop here and give a shout out to MGA for their example in social media and what they do so great. Their content is consistent. They have branded visuals. It's focused content. And I want to point out the video here, you know, I just want to note that it's not always this kind of high definition, high resolution, short-term video, even though our iPhones are becoming so incredibly sophisticated. They're kind of amazing actually, compared to just 5 years ago, what those look like. It'll always be more important to have the best content, even if it's recorded on Zoom, it's from your smartphone, wherever that is. So if you're interviewing someone else or even yourself, you have to feel comfortable. When you're comfortable, you're open, you're vulnerable, you're all the things that people are looking to connect with, right? And so putting a big camera in someone's face, you tighten up, right? Or whatever that might look like. So put yourself in an environment where even if it's a little pixelated, it's not the best quality, you might not have the most recent iPhone, it's okay. Like that's always going to resonate more with the community. But video certainly is going to reach much further than text or just an image as well. And then I also, because we do have this coming up next month, MG Awareness Month, so I wanted to turn over just a moment to Allison to speak about Awareness Month and the graphics and things that they're doing. So Allison.
Thanks, Mike. Yes, so we are working on a graphic that people can share and hopefully personalize. We found out today that Facebook no longer offers the photo frame for your profile, so we will be making some tweaks and coming back with the finished product for June Awareness Month. But we hope that you'll participate.
Thank you. Okay, the next section about engaging with others. So how do you keep them engaged long term? So a couple tips on this. So if you've ever, the 2-3 brands that perhaps you mentioned earlier, maybe you've made a comment. Have you ever had a brand or an influencer or someone that you just really admire and they reply to you in the comments of Instagram or Facebook? And like, how did that feel? Like when they acknowledged you or just said thanks, or perhaps with that, like, it feels good, right? Like, it's amazing how antisocial social media can be. And perhaps you look through your companies that you follow and you're like, they actually never reply to anybody. And even though it's like people making these incredible comments and thoughtful stories, and yet they're not even acknowledged. And so these are, so just considering ways that you can start a conversation by having two-way dialogue versus just responding. So when people comment, that's a really big deal. Like, take that opportunity to start a conversation. So as an example, posing a follow-up question versus just saying, thank you for your comment. So, or just liking it. Like, keep the platform social. So if someone comments, especially when it comes to, I'm sharing something about MG, like to Sarah's point earlier, it just starts a dialogue, whether it's in private messaging or DMs, or it's publicly on one of the platforms. Like, it's important to answer their questions, but also perhaps others just to ask them questions to keep that dialogue going. That's a really powerful way. And the secondary benefit of that is it helps the algorithm, so your posts are seen by more individuals as well. Another fun thing is, and this is the ask questions, is allowing your community to guide your content. So using those like Instagram open-ended questions and polls to understand what they'd like to learn more about, what they'd like to see more of, kind of use their feedback in the content you produce moving forward. So if you feel kind of stuck, just ask people, just have an open-ended question, perhaps, or a poll, or just something that gives them some sort of guidance. I know the comment that was made earlier that you did pose a question and you didn't get the feedback, but and then the next is just connecting with others. So reach out to other members of the community to find ways to creatively build awareness together. So, you know, aligning with, of course, organizations like MGA on awareness days and months, the creative assets they use to show a uniform voice and reach the highest level of awareness. So if you know someone, I'm sure you're all connected to someone already in the MG community, maybe it's a private Facebook group or wherever you're at. Like, is there someone that you resonate with? It's your person. You could go together in on this thing, or perhaps even highlight them and on your channel and kind of promote, if you will, each other's content. And I wanted to also, Sarah, and perhaps many of you are part of this group, but I wanted Sarah to comment on, she has support groups online for the MG community. And so, Sarah, I wanted to ask you if you could speak to your experience and just moderating some of the support groups for the MG community.
Sure. Yeah, I definitely, when I got my diagnosis, I joined several Facebook groups. You know, I searched for Myasthenia Gravis or Myasthenia Gravis support. And on Facebook, especially, they have the groups. So that was helpful, joining different groups. And sometimes when the thing that you are looking for doesn't exist, you can just create your own. So what I wanted was maybe less like health focused or less talking about specific treatments, but more just community building and being able to connect with other people who were having a similar experience. So I started a group for people with chronic and invisible illnesses. So there are quite a few MG folks in the group, and there are folks who have lots of other different autoimmune diseases and conditions. But overall, even though our symptoms might be a little bit different, our overall experience, I think, is really similar. So yeah, if anybody would like to be part of that group, it's called Invisible, Not Imaginary. And I can share a link or have
Yeah,
Allison share a link either.
that'd be great. What platforms are you on with the group?
That group is on Facebook.
Okay.
Mhm.
I love that. I love that you saw just a need. Like the first thing that we all do with any kind of daily medical issue versus a rare disease versus a huge diagnosis that's life-changing, we go to Google, right? Like we go and search. That's what everyone does. And I love that you're working your way up to have a more visible voice on kind of misinformation that can be out there, but just the support group that is so well needed. If you think about it, that is the ideal usage of social media, is if you're living with something like MG and you're living in a very small town in the middle of, you know, Alaska, who do you connect with? Like it's perfect. Like you connect with Sarah, like that's what you do. And all of a sudden you feel less alone and it's meaningful. Like it's a quite beautiful thing. Anyway, so thank you, Sarah, for what you do. And anyone else that's also running their own communities or just participating in these communities and opening themselves up. So that's wonderful.
Can I add one more thing to this?
Yes, of course, please.
Yeah, you brought up a great point about someone living in Alaska could be a part of my group. And actually, a lot of the people that I've connected with on social media, I've never even met in person, but I feel like I could call them or anytime that they're a friend of mine because of just our interactions. I think that's a really cool power of the internet, that it connects people in that way.
Kind of nice to hear, right? Like there are a lot of negative things about social media, obvious things about social media, and it's nice to hear positive things that we can use it for good. So yeah, so thank you, Sarah. Um pivoting just a little bit, this is my grandma. That's me and my grandma, Grandma Eileen. She actually passed away. It's been 6 years, I think she passed away. So I just want to give an example of engagement done well. Wendy's, the picture on the top left, it's a tweet from, I tweeted to Wendy's, and it was just a picture of my grandma holding a Diet Coke. She always has her pinky up. I don't know if your grandparents do that or your grandma does that, whenever they eat, the pinky's always up. It's so funny. And I live in New York. I'd fly to Seattle where she lived, and we'd go to lunch at Wendy's and have these like 2-3 hour conversations. And it was my favorite thing to do with her. And so Wendy's caught notice of this, and immediately, like, they retweeted that photo of her, or my tweet, I should say. And then they reached out. And this ended up being a long-term relationship with my grandma, where she became the face of Wendy's for several years. To the point they were live streaming on their channels a Q&A on like her birthday. And so that picture of me and her is in the back of a Wendy's in Bellevue, Washington. And the Wendy's crew flew out, and then they just live streamed Q&A. People could ask her questions live, and you will not believe this, but that picture, she's 100 years old. I kid you not. I know she's got amazing skin and genetics. I do not have those same genetics, but you could say anything. And here's someone who doesn't care about social media. She's not on social media. She cares less about it. She just cares about people. And that comes through. The authenticity comes through, and people just resonated talking with her, to the point that I saw such a great need of people like her that I would take a portable lemonade stand, and I would place it in different parts of New York City, from Central Park to Wall Street, set up a lemonade stand with a laptop, same laptop I have right now, and had noise cancellation headphones, and on FaceTime. And my grandma would sit in, at her table in Seattle, and then random people would just come up, and I had like a little chair, and they would sit down in the middle of Central Park, and they would have this conversation with my grandma. And I'd have little question prompts, and the question prompt, they would choose one and they would discuss it, because I didn't want them to spend all this time with how was your day and where are you from and that kind of thing. I wanted them to get right to the meat. So a question example would be something like, my grandma would ask that person, what is something unique about your grandmother? And then immediately they were just connected. And, there's a lot of tears, and Columbia students to a guy living on the streets, an opera singer. She got to experience New York in its fullest. But so that's my grandma. I love that Wendy's kind of kept this whole thing going. And just as a side note, which is really funny, is not funny, but when she passed, at her funeral, I was giving the eulogy, and at this little church, and Wendy's catered her funeral. And so just piles and piles of like Frosties and chicken nuggets and Wendy's chili and all of it. So I'm giving the eulogy at this church, and it smelled like a Wendy's inside the church. And so, they went all out. So, and it was awesome. So just an example of an incredible way to engage with people. Before we kind of get to the conversation to answer some of your questions, I just wanted to share a couple final tips. And Sarah, if anything on here kind of speaks to you too, I'd love for you to chime in on this. But so inevitably, from outside your social network or inside your social network, sometimes you can have negative feedback. And every situation is different. But how you deal with these things can be very tricky. We as humans do this. And there was a stand-up comedian. He sold out Madison Square Garden for like 3 or 4 nights in a row. And he was on a talk show, and the host said, "How does it feel to stand with just a microphone and tell jokes and have 20,000 whatever people all laugh at the same time? That's got to be the most amazing feeling." And he said, "Well, yeah, I mean, that's why I do stand-up comedy. That's why I do what I do but honestly, what I see when I'm up there on the stage amongst the 20,000, I see like the 300 people that are kind of sprinkled around that 20,000 that have their arms like this, and that are kind of looking at the person they're with, kind of like, I don't know if I like this. Was that good? He's like, that's what I see." And I'm like, how true that is for us humans to not see the 19,700, but we only see the 300 that say something that might be a negative sentiment. So we can focus on that, unfortunately. So I have just 3 options for dealing with negativity. Number 1, to be upfront with them, as far as including a line, perhaps like in your bio or your description, such as, comments targeting others or myself will be deleted. So you're just very upfront. So about creating a safe space. The next is replying privately. So someone makes a comment on a post that you put up there. Honestly, I recommend this one probably the most, which is ask the person to take the conversation into your DMs. Take it off the public platform into a DM, ask them questions why they're so negative or whatever the issue might be, and get to the root of what the issue is. So this shows that you can have the hard conversations, but it also puts the ball kind of back in their court to then process what they've said on social media, if they really mean that, and get to a better place with them. And then the third is just replying publicly. So going and you might ask a follow-up question to get more information. You might have the rest of the community kind of jump in and support and help you to kind of help resolve their concerns and that kind of thing. But those are generally the three primary ways. And then there's just the no reply. So repeat offenders, you have the option to delete, block them, obviously if it's spam, all those kinds of things. But be okay getting that negativity off of your page when you can. Sarah, do you have any, I guess, thoughts on this particular subject with your community? It sounds like you guys have obviously a very safe space and it's very positive, but anything that comes to your mind when speaking about this topic?
Yeah, well, I like the 4 agreements. One of them is don't take things personally, and it kind of makes sense. If someone makes a comment, it's not really a reflection of you, it's a reflection of them and what they're going through at that time. So I don't take it personally. I love what you said about following up with them or messaging them privately, and setting boundaries like, hey, I don't appreciate this in this space.
Mhm.
If you continue to make comments like this, I'm going to have to remove you from the group or disengage with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Being
Yeah.
respectful and kind, but yeah, setting the boundary.
I like what you said about not taking it personally too. Like, and the comment that was made earlier about I post a question on social and I didn't really have anyone respond to it or lack thereof. And like that can feel really personal, right? Like I am being vulnerable and then no one responds. It's hard not to take that personally, and also getting outside of our own selves. Like maybe it's just the time of day that you posted. Maybe it's just honestly people just aren't at their phones or not at the computers at the time you posted that. The algorithms of social, if it doesn't capture someone really quick, then it kind of puts that at a lower kind of tier. And so then it's not just being seen by people. And so that can be very frustrating, but it's not your fault. It's trying not to take it personally is important, which leads me to my kind of one of my final points here, which is your mental health is paramount. You already have enough to deal with. You already have it's MG, it's just life and kids and relationships, and on top of everything can feel very overwhelming. And so if you're trying to build a community or just be part of a community on social, just surround yourself by people that lift you up. It's okay to create like a separate account that just focuses on MG versus kind of merging your personal account as well. You can decide if you'd like to keep them separate or merged and that kind of thing. So you can focus solely on awareness if you wanted to. But you have to take breaks on social media. So if you feel at any time overwhelmed, it's okay. Step back from it, even delete the app off your phone. The accounts are all still there, even if you delete your app. Come back to it so you're not tempted to get on there and check it. Come back to it when you feel like you're in a better place and you want to share content again and that kind of thing. So, or just participate. So mental health, most important thing. No question, this group understands that and gets it. I just want to remind you that social can be also a very negative place that can hurt us. And so our mental well-being. So with that, I just want to open up to some Q&A. We have time for just, let's see, it's 6:49 right now. So yeah, we just have a couple minutes here, but if you have any questions in that Q&A button for myself, for Sarah, about anything we've talked about, and we have one. Okay,
Yes.
let's see. So it says for a for a support group, would you recommend sharing the same content across all your networks? Say if you made a 60-second video, would you put the same video on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok? Or is it better to try to aim the content for a couple platforms? Let me just read the rest of yours. Maybe that depends on the content somewhat. The audience of Facebook is older than TikTok, of course. That feels like the answer might be sometimes, or it depends. Are there free tools that you recommend for managing posts on multiple platforms? Woo, that's a lot of stuff. Thank you for that. So rule of thumb, try not to be on every platform. Be good at the ones that you resonate with the most, that you honestly, most of my clients, when I start with a client, we want to be on every platform, or they're already on a bunch of different platforms and it just is kind of all over the board. And let's just be really good at one. Let's just start with one and get that down, and then we'll start using the others. Repurposing content. Let me manage this with, it's overwhelming to think I have to create unique content for every platform. So let's get rid of that out of your mind really quick. But if you consider the differences between TikTok and Facebook or Instagram, like they're pretty significant. The tools are different. Everything looks a little bit different. When you have the bandwidth, the ability, you want to create unique content across each of the platforms that you're good at. Try your very best, but don't make it so it feels incredibly overwhelming. But yeah, you can feel it, right? Like if you go to a Facebook post of a page you follow, and then you go to their Instagram page, it's the same post with kind of the same copy and everything else. It just kind of doesn't resonate with you, right? And then step back and say, okay, we're going to make our primary platform for this particular post. It makes the most sense for this video because it's a little longer form, Facebook. And then with Instagram, all right, let's just do an Instagram story that is then kind of cross-promoting, that's sending them back to the Facebook page. And so that's probably the best way to do it. But blasting everything out across all platforms with the same type of content, you're looking for a long-term relationship on each of the platforms. It's a different audience. And once it feels that you've just kind of taken content and throwing it on all the platforms, you start to lose a little of that engagement over time. And so be really good at one platform versus being on all of them is my recommendation. Let's see. Anyone else have any questions? Or JB, did you have any other questions that have popped up on your end there? I
think one thing that, often comes up is there a day of the week that it's best for me to post?
Yes. Yeah, great question. Like in general, you're looking at weekdays, you're looking at Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, between like 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern Standard on those days is when most of the kind of posts by everyone on social, not everyone, but that's when most of the posts are being posted. And so it's that's a crowded time, but that's when most of the eyeballs are there. Mondays, you kind of want to avoid a little bit, even though it's Monday nights. Fridays, end of day, people are checking out of work. If you're posting, just consider that there's more than half of the people are going to see that content on their phones versus a desktop or laptop. So the visuals you use need to be large enough. The copy needs to be large enough and easy and simple to view. A great majority of people are viewing content between kind of 8 and 11 Eastern Standard Time is a huge chunk of time when people are just kind of absorbing social media. They're reading and viewing the posts. And so just considering that is posting in the afternoon, and then by the evening is when most people are actually finally seeing that content. Yeah, thank you for that. Any other questions? Oh, I have so hashtags and tagging. I think you all are pretty good at this. It sounds like just from the comments and things that I've read, you're used to this, like you understand how to use them. Like you don't have to overwhelm with hashtags. Use all the designated hashtags that you can to the purpose of your content. If it's for MG, go to Instagram and search, just put in a hashtag and then start putting in MG, like the most popular one, just Myasthenia gravis. And you're going to see this kind of drop down of the other most popular hashtags related to MG. those are the ones that you want to use. Using other ones that are more general, you're reaching an audience that isn't affiliated with MG most likely, and that's fine if that's the purpose of the content. Otherwise, you're trying to reach just people that are part of the community for most of your content. And then tag away. Always tag as much as you can. Like, who doesn't want to be part of that collaboration? So just before you post, just go to their pages and find the correct handle and then make sure they're tagged. If it's an organization like MG, for instance, MGA, you definitely want to tag them on your content so they get that pop-up. They're aware that you have tagged them, and now they can comment, reshare it, or whatever they want to do with the content, and vice versa. So that's great. But yeah, any other questions for myself or Sarah before we wrap up? Okay. Well, thank you guys all. I want to just hand this over here. Yeah, I want to pass it back over to JB to close us out. But thank you everyone for participating and all your comments and everything else. It was great to do this virtual chat with you tonight.
Thank you so much, Mike. It was really interesting to see all the people say national parks. I love the national parks. And I just have to tell everybody that the U.S. Interior, if you like the national parks, you'll like the post for the U.S. National Interior. And I think we had so many great suggestions for ways to heighten awareness during Myasthenia Gravis Awareness Month. So I appreciate everybody getting engaged and the MGA for hosting with us. So I just want to let you know about a couple of resources that are available to you. First, you'll be receiving from the MGA a follow-up sheet that summarizes a lot of the best practices that Mike shared with you today. And so you can keep that handy and next to your computer as you prepare your content to raise awareness for Myasthenia Gravis next month. And then Allison is going to be sending out some supporting graphics as well to use for Myasthenia Gravis Awareness Month. Allison, any final words about some of these tools? Or
Not yet. Like I said, we will get the.
Stay tuned. Stay
Stay
tuned.
tuned. Thank you.
Okay. Perfect. And then if you could just go to the last slide. We really enjoy bringing these programs to the advocacy community, but we really rely on your feedback so we can continue getting support for the programs. And also you really inform the content and the topics that we pick. And so if you scan this QR code, you can just take 5 questions. It'll take you 1 minute. You can let us know how we did today, maybe where we could have improved, what you liked. And you'll also have an opportunity to suggest some future topics. So would really appreciate you taking a moment to do that. And I think also, Allison, we'll leave a link to the survey for those who can't do it right now in the follow-up email that will include some of the information that I shared on the previous slide. So Allison, I'll just turn it back over to you to close out this webinar. And thank you so much to you and your community for hosting us today.
Thank you, JV, and thank you, Mike and Sarah, for your presentation. Really appreciate it. And Immunovant for sponsoring this webinar. So we will see you all. Hopefully our virtual monthly meetup is going to be the Tuesday after Memorial Day due to the holiday. So you should have a link in your email if you'd like to sign up for that. So we will see you all soon. Thank you.